Many people understandably associate firearms with violence and bloodshed. And because decent people don't want violence and bloodshed, many instinctively dislike or fear firearms and support so-called gun control, based on the assumption that outlawing firearms would mean reducing violence and bloodshed. In reality, this is not at all the case. Saying, I don't want a firearm because I don't want violence and bloodshed is no more rational than saying, I don't want an airbag because I don't want to crash. Of course, the reason people want airbags is not because they're eager to crash, but because they understand that in the unfortunate event that they do get into a serious accident, having an airbag is very likely to reduce human pain and suffering. And so it is with firearms. In the unfortunate event that violence does occur, good people being armed can dramatically reduce or eliminate human pain and suffering, especially the pain and suffering of innocent people. Everyone knows you shouldn't use something like a chainsaw if you don't know how to use it properly, or if you think you might hurt yourself or someone else. It's the same with firearms. If you don't feel comfortable with them, or you think you may hurt yourself or someone else, either don't have one or learn to use one properly. But make no mistake, if you do not possess the means and the willingness to forcibly defend yourself and your family, that won't magically stop the nasty people out there from having the means and the willingness to victimize you.
Today marks the most deadly shooting in American history. The shooter was apparently armed with a handgun and a powerful assault rifle. This massacre is therefore a further reminder of how easy it is for someone to get their hands on a weapon that lets them shoot people in a school, or in a house of worship, or a movie theater, or in a nightclub. And we have to decide if that's the kind of country we want to be. And to actively do nothing is a decision as well.
The evidence shows that responsible people being armed reduces crime, and the government's own crime statistics show that privately owned firearms prevent between 1 and 2 million crimes every year, usually without a shot even being fired. Now think about this. We've all seen thousands of examples of bad guys in movies using guns to do bad things. But have you ever seen a Hollywood movie or TV show that depicted an average armed citizen preventing a crime? In real life, it happens all the time. So why does Hollywood almost never show it happening?
The attacks in Orlando were a false flag terror attack. But before the mainstream media takes that out of context, I want to be clear. Our government and the governments of Europe allowed these huge hordes of radical jihadis in, and have even allowed them in without vetting them on record, landing at airports across the country and not even checking their passports, IDs, or visas. Our governments are bringing these people in, and they're allowing them to operate openly in our society so they can attack us and then have our freedoms taken. So radical Islam is real. It's growing like a cancer. They kill each other in their own countries. It is a civil war religion of destabilization and slavery. You can argue what it's been in the past, but it certainly is that today, with Saudi Arabia quarterbacking the whole deal. So yes, it's a false flag in that our government let it happen, run by Obama, just like Merkel did in Germany, so they can then say, oh, we've got to pass laws and hate laws banning your speech because you're making the Muslims angry. Or, oh my gosh, we've got to pass other hate laws, to deal with right-wingers and stuff. And we need your guns, of course, so you can't protect yourself. So, San Bernardino, all these events, the Major Hassan attack, the government knew at the highest levels and tied the hands of the FBI, the military, and others in every case so they couldn't protect us, so that when the attacks happened, they have an excuse to take more of our freedoms. Yes, the globalists are causing a clash of civilizations. Yes, they funded the Arab Spring. I tried to stop that. Now they've done it. Now we're being hit by the tsunami of the Islamic invasion, and we're being told, submit. I'm not going to submit. I'm going to stand up for freedom.
Gun control is not about doing away with guns. It's about making it so that only cops and soldiers have guns. Have you ever heard any politician suggesting that his enforcers and protectors be disarmed? Their goal is not to make guns disappear, but to create a huge imbalance of power, with government agents remaining heavily armed and everyone else left helpless. The politicians know that wouldn't make you and me any safer. Far from it. So what is their agenda? Government is about control. By way of taxation, you are forced to fund the politicians' schemes. Whenever they enact a law, they aren't asking you nicely to behave a certain way. They are ordering you to do or not do certain things, with the threat that their hired enforcers will punish you if you disobey. You know this, even though you'll rarely hear it described this bluntly and honestly. The so-called lawmakers think they have the right to forcibly dominate and extort you. If you don't like funding warmongering, bailouts, a giant welfare state, or a giant police state, they don't care. You will pay up, or eventually they will send their men with guns to take your property or put you in prison. This is true of so-called gun control laws as well. If some peaceful, moral person owns a gun for self-defense, after the politicians declared that to be illegal, what happens to him? Other men with guns show up and, using violence or the threat of violence, forcibly take that person hostage. In reality, so-called gun control is gun violence. It's obvious why those in power want their own enforcers to be armed, so they can force you to obey them. And it should be just as obvious why the last thing the controllers would want is for you to possess the means to resist their enforcers. As people get more and more upset about what those in Washington are doing, and more inclined to resist, it should come as no surprise that those in government are becoming more desperate to disarm the people. They don't care if you whine and protest, but they do care if you disobey. And they know that if they had all the guns, it would be a lot easier to keep you subservient and obedient. And those who seek power not only exploit and exaggerate real problems, but often terrorize the people with make-believe dangers, or intentionally cause problems themselves, just to have an excuse to increase their own power. One very old technique for doing this is known as a false flag operation, where a regime perpetrates acts of unjust violence while making it look as if they were done by some foreign enemy. Once the hatred and fear of the people has been stirred up, they almost always eagerly support the authoritarian agenda of those in power. And there are many other methods governments can use to create a problem and then use that problem as an excuse to demand more money and power for itself in the name of fighting against the very problem it created in the first place. This can be done by engineering an economic collapse, by causing poverty to justify the creation of a welfare state, by creating black markets which lead to increased crime to justify a militarization of the police force, by fueling racial or religious conflicts, and so on. Whatever those in power can do to train the people to be scared of the idea of not having a powerful government around will almost always result in the people welcoming or even demanding violations of their own rights and liberties. Of course, there will always be conflict in the world. But government only exacerbates and enhances disputes and problems intentionally, because if the people are not afraid of some threat or danger, real or imagined, they would never have a reason to accept a master over them. Government power does not serve to solve problems. Problems serve as the excuse to create never-ending government power. How many problems can you think of that government has ever fixed? Did the countless laws and billions of dollars end the drug trade? Did it end prostitution? Did it end terrorism? Did it end poverty? When has there been any government program or department which achieved its goal, solved a problem, and was therefore disbanded and repealed? It is never in government's interest to solve problems or eliminate threats, because it is always the fear caused by problems and threats which trick the people into tolerating the existence of a ruling class. Another ploy used to convince people to support tyranny is for politicians to seek votes from one group of people by promising to tax or control some other group. Those who seek power intentionally create divisions between rich and poor, black and white, men and women, different religions and cultures, and so on, telling each group that if only they elect the right candidates, their priorities and values can be enacted into law and imposed upon the rest of society. Politicians are masters at exploiting the fact that few can resist the temptation to have their views and beliefs forced onto everyone else. On every possible disagreement or difference in opinion, politicians will offer to use the force of government to legalize one viewpoint and outlaw another. Some voters will cheer for a tax to help the poor, while others will cheer for a tax to fund a police force. The politicians propose one new program or agenda after another, each requiring more money and power for the ruling class and less freedom for the people. If someone thinks that he knows how things should be, some politician will always be there promising that if he is elected, he will make that vision a reality. As long as people view law and government as a legitimate way to control others, why wouldn't each person try to use the democratic process to force his neighbors to behave in certain ways and to fund certain things? Nearly everyone falls into this trap when it is called democracy, and painted not only as moral but noble, as participating in the process and doing one's civic duty. The end result of politics is never the perfect society, or even the people getting what they want. The end result is groups of people constantly being played against each other, each side of every dispute asking government to forcibly rob and control the other side, with the only real winners being the political class. Over and over again, the people have ended up enthusiastically advocating their own enslavement, simply because it is so tempting for each person to believe that the world would be what it should be if only authoritarian power was used to serve what he wants and what he believes in.
Because as you said, it's just as they turn up the heat, as ISIS orders the attacks to take place, it happens. The media tries to cover it up. How many attacks will it take until the government that has brought these people in Europe or here is held accountable? Because here's the thing, Obama, you're not blaming the Second Amendment that our forebears fought for, everybody else fought for, and the First Amendment and our free open culture that you come in and piss all over. You're not going to sit there and blame what happened in Florida on us. Do you understand, you son of a bitch? And I don't usually talk like that, but it's clear there's about to be a bunch more attacks. And I'm not going to sit here and take the blame for it because the Daily Beast and Media Matters says so. You're declaring war on this country with a bunch of jihadis you brought in. You did it, you son of a bitch. I'm sorry, but that's what it comes down to. And the games are over. I'm not going to sit here and have my family and this country scapegoated because you're a slime ball that hates this country and is allied with a bunch of people wearing nightgowns.